What's going on, TikTok family? In this particular video today, I want to go over a specific topic that might be foreign to some, or you might be familiar with this topic. I will say this at the beginning: if you are interested in watching the Castlevania series, especially season 2 known as Castlevania Nocturne, and you don't want any spoiler alerts, I would highly suggest cutting this video off right now. But with no further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get into the meat of this specific video. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about Elizabeth Bathory, also known to the mainstream narrative as, of course, it's saying here, a Hungarian serial killer. And I'm going to give you a brief overview from an article off of departments.kings.edu to kind of give an overview of this individual in real reality and how she's kind of known through the mainstream narrative itself. So, of course, Elizabeth Bathory, also known as Elizabeth Bathory, is one of the most infamous figures in history. Her crimes caused her to become a legendary and feared figure. Even after the legends have been lifted, her crimes still seem unimaginable. Bathory was born in 1560 to a well-established family, or so it said. Her family had produced many powerful people in her time, including the kings of Transylvania and Poland. She was married off for political reasons to Count Ferenc Nadadzi, I think I'm saying that correctly. Before the marriage took place, she became pregnant with a child from a peasant. She was taken away to a family castle under the excuse that she was sick. She had a daughter which was given away. She began a practice of torturing servants and was introduced into the occult while her husband was away at battle. The fascination with torture began for her as she saw her family deal with political enemies. After her husband's death, her fears of growing old began to grow more and more. When striking a servant girl for combing her hair too hard, some of her blood fell on her hands. She thought the blood made her skin look younger and became convinced that blood was the secret of eternal youth. She was also convinced that blood from virgin girls would be the most effective. The maid was murdered so that Elizabeth could bathe in her blood. From her most notorious deeds began. The tortures the girls would be put through would last for weeks, months. They were then cut in several different ways to provide blood for Bathory to wash herself with. More than 600 women died because of Elizabeth. These women ranged from peasants to members of the nobility. Investigation on Elizabeth's activities began in 1610. Some claim that she was investigated not because of her crimes, but because of the finances involved with her family. These investigations also came only after 4 noblewomen were found murdered. Laws forbade she be put to trial because of her royal standing. These laws were removed to deal with her. Elizabeth did not admit to the crimes, but she was sent to a small walled-in room in her castle. Only a small opening to provide food was allowed. She stayed for 4 years in that room until her death in 1614. Many of her accomplices were also found guilty and put to death, but Bathory avoided that punishment due to her status. Sometimes it is easy to concentrate on her crimes and ignore Elizabeth herself. She was very beautiful and also very intelligent. In fact, she used her intelligence as a tool to get more victims as she lured noble girls to her castle under the promise of an education. It is also interesting to look at the political actions involved in this story. There are several interests involved in the prosecution of Elizabeth Bathory. Most involved the family fortune she had control over and people wanting an excuse to take it. She had the potential as being remembered as one of the best members in the Bathory family, but she wound up becoming the most infamous. And of course, that's an article giving a mainstream kind of connotation to this character known as Elizabeth Bathory. Now, in the show, like I said before, Castlevania Nocturne, she's depicted here as shown after her ascension to what is considered the vampire messiah, if you will. In the show itself, she is the queen of vampires who plans to take over the world by bringing eternal night to it, and with this, leave her vampiric brethren to roam free forever. She is immensely powerful and believes herself to be the reincarnation of the ancient Egyptian goddess of war, Sekhmet. And Sekhmet in and of itself is actually a real topic that you can also go look into yourself. Something interesting that I'm pulling from this series, some gnosis, if you will, deeper spiritual knowledge that's being, shown through these TV shows, as we all know they are, is of course that how Sekhmet itself is a solar deity, sometimes given the epithet the Eye of Ra. She is often associated with the goddess of Thor and Bastet. So that's a real world or mainstream understanding of it itself. But something else interesting that I'm noticing not really being mentioned is the etymology here. This individual, Erzsébet, is said she bathed in the blood of peasants, right? So maybe that's originally where we're getting the phrase or cliche, if you will, of bloodbath. And that's even tying in, I'm seeing a connection here with how it's tying into Bathory. So the word bath is obviously in the name. It's also, they're pushing it off as, through the mainstream narrative that she was just this ruthless serial killer. This is happening back in the 1500s. Of course, we have these legends and myths, etc., right? But, if you go look at any of my other content or some of my other content, you'll see, with how a lot of stuff that's pushed off as myth actually happened, etc. But I'm also seeing a connection with the name Bath also has the name Bat in it. So I don't think that that's coincidental, of course, which obviously ties into how in Castlevania, the show here, they're showing her being actually a vampire, if you will. But I think this is absolutely fascinating that they show a lot of gnosis in this Castlevania series. I didn't really go over the first season. The first season more so kind of covers Dracula, but the second series, Nocturne, is covering a completely secondary antagonist. Like I said, that is known as Erzsébet Bathory. In the show, she's also known as the Devourer of Light, Lady of Slaughter, Messiah, Mistress of Dread, Sekhmet, of course, she who mauls, taker of souls, the one before whom evil trembles, Vampire Lioness, and the Vampire Messiah. So I really think this is an very interesting topic. If anyone else has anything else to add to the conversation that could potentially elaborate on something like this further, I think something interesting as well I want to kind of end this presentation on is my wife was mentioning how everyone's always mentioning how there's a second sun, if you will, and how potentially the sun that we actually are experiencing in the modern day could be a false sun, and people also see a secondary sun. So let's say, of course, in this anime, they're showing, her creating this artificial eclipse for an eternal night. Well, of course, it's showing it like it's covering the sun, but what's this? Let's just, for argument's sake, say that is an artificial sun. Well, then that would make sense in terms of vampires or bloodsuckers walking around today, because it would be artificial sunlight, even though it's not the type of connotation that we understand vampires to actually be able to walk around at nighttime. But of course, that could be a stretch, but I do think it's an interesting theory. But like I said, if you have anything to add to the conversation, comment down below. Hope everybody's doing good. That's the end of the presentation.